Hello and welcome back to the Sardonic Podcast. I'm your host, Elijah Stubbs Roche, and right about now, this would be the point where I'd introduce my guests. There'd be jokes, there'd be jovialities, and maybe some of them would be funny and maybe some of them wouldn't be. But today, there are no guests. There's no scripts. Today's episode's a little different. I've chosen not to over edit this. If anything, the only edits you'll see in here will be me putting together multiple takes. There are no guests because I didn't think that today's episode needed guests. I don't know how long this episode will run, and there's no session notes to guide me. Today, I want to talk about something more serious, something that plagues me, has plagued me, and is even kind of plaguing me right now. I want to talk about depression. I want to talk about something maybe that hurts more people than they might think. This episode's called Looking Down. And I called it that because one of my friends a long time ago once told me you can tell a lot about a person by the direction they look when they think about life. He said that a person who's looking down is looking down because he's not praying to a God who's above his head and he's not looking forward to what's happening. I always remembered him telling me that because I realized that I've spent the majority of my life looking down. By my own volition, I'm a person who's immensely self-loathing. Depression is something that runs both in my family, but is something I think I might have had even without that. I think it's hard to understand a person with depression without context. I think that depression, it can be something that comes out of nowhere, but I think most times, for most people, depression is something that is the byproduct of everything that's led to this point in their lives. And so I think before I can talk about my depression, before I can talk about my life, or anybody else's depression, it's important to know where it comes from. I was born in California, and it sounds like a great place to live. You know, it's a bright, happy place full of actors, actresses, opportunities. All of the industries love to celebrate around California. But that's not the part of California I came from. I come from Encinitas, later moved to Carlsbad, but in between those two spots, I spent a large amount of time in the ghettos of California. And you get a different look of the world when you live there. You see things that it's hard to understand as a kid what they mean. Violence, drugs. My mom was the one who made the decision that she wouldn't raise her kid in a place like that. And so we moved to Colorado. It's where I've lived for the past 20 years. And it might seem like it's an improvement. You know, I'm in a smaller town, a nicer place, more wholesome, but terrible people live just about anywhere, and that was more than true for me. Some of my first memories of living in California, or of Colorado, were my parents splitting up. My brother doesn't remember it, and I think even sometimes my own parents don't remember that time as well as I do. I remember it was a sad time, it was a hard time, it was a time where I felt betrayed by both my parents. I felt like I couldn't trust either of them. It's hard to describe the feeling where you wonder if your parents hate each other more than they love you. It's something that I think if you felt it, if you understand it, you might know what I'm talking about. But it's very difficult to put it into words, that feeling that somebody else's grudges and anger were more important than their own kid. I was just kind of talented kid growing up, and that Makes me sound like a bit of a douche, I'm aware. I was smarter than most people, but I was always a kid full of expectations. Everyone had an expectation. Whether it was a teacher who thought I could perform better or my parents, 99% was never good enough. It was always, why wasn't this B and A? Why wasn't this A and A plus? Why couldn't I get this 95% to 100%? It was always never good enough for the people around me. And that's something that can be kind of hard to deal with every day. For the most part, it kind of just came and went. I remember drifting a lot through my school years. I think that was the first time I was probably ever depressed in my life. Maybe I just didn't have the words to describe it. And I think that's the part where I'm going to take my first little break from my story to talk about it. Expectation can be a double-edged sword. It can be something that can help you. It can help set a guideline, something that you can strive for, something that you can reach for. And expectations can break a person down. Failure is something that some people learn how to deal with at a young age. People who weren't smart or people who aren't talented. You will fail in life. It's a part of living. I never failed in life. I had two parents who failed me, and then I had a progression of life where I had always succeeded. I'd always surpassed the bar. My first time failing anything was in middle school. I remember it. It was a social studies class that I had missed the day where they had explained the project and no one told me about it, including the teacher, and I had not done it. I still technically passed the class, but it was a D. It was barely passing. I remember that day. I remember the disappointment. I think the thing that upset me the most wasn't that my parents were angry at me. It was that they weren't. It seemed like they didn't care. That sounds strange, but it's the point in my life that I realized something very important. I realized the kind of person I was. I'm a self-loather. That's true, and it's still true. I talk a lot of big shit. Whenever I'm on these podcasts, I sound very confident. I sound very charismatic. Maybe the editing helps that come across. I know that in these rough cuts, I am full of pauses, I'm full of breaths, I'm full of ums, but when I edit it, it always sounds better. I'm not editing this one. I want people to hear what it sounds like. Self-loathing is the source of, I think, the biggest part of my depression, and I think that perhaps a lot of people out there are depressed more because of what they think of themselves than what anyone else thinks of them. Their circumstances can never be as bad as what they think. And I'm not saying that depression is just something that exists in your head, that it's just some fantasy you're living in, or that it's some form of self-righteous self-deprecation. I'm aware that it's deeper than that it hurts more than that. But for me, it was always just that agony, that feeling of hating myself. I say it to people as a joke, but there's always an air of truth in any joke, which is that you can hate me for what I think or for what I say, but you'll never hate me as much as I hate me. And I think to understand self-loathing, or really what started that, what brought me to the point where I would hate myself because no one else would, I'll tell another story. This one was when I was in high school. I was part of the anime club. It seemed on the surface like a nice group of people. And in fairness, they were nice people for the most part. There were some of them who weren't. Some of them who, that lifetime of bullying that comes with being a nerd in America had gotten to them. They were hostile, they were angry, they were subverted, they were quiet about it. But they were just like all the other ones. You'd have to be careful. One kid we went to school with was the target of these angry kids bullying. And I joined in on it. I hmm. I remember it a lot. I think about it a lot still. We said and did terrible things to him, and you think to yourself that there's no malice in it. That what you're not doing because you hate this kid. You're doing it because you don't want to be him. You don't want to be the one they turn on. I remember that vividly, and I still beat myself up over it. I've talked to him so many times since then. We're friends. We talk normally, casually now, but there are still days that I think about what we did, how we treated him, that I can't get it out of my head, and it leads me to this self-destructive path that comes with self-loathing. And I get that there's something intrinsically selfish about self-loathing, that a person with real depression has things happen to them that they don't deserve, and that a person who's depressed because they hate themselves is selfish. I know that that's true. I know that there's a feeling to that I can't diverse from. Things changed, actually. The nature of my depression changed. I still am a self-loather. It doesn't bother me as much as it used to. I've never been one for addictions, whether it's pills or alcohol or drugs. I've always dealt with my problems as they came along. Just me and whatever grit and willpower will get me through to the next one. Things changed, though. I graduated high school and got to that point that every millennial kid thinks he's in. I liked to believe that I was different, that I was better than all the other millennials that came around, but that was a load of shit at best. I walked out of that high school graduation ceremony and immediately realized that I was never prepared for the real world. I was never given that choice. I was never given anything. And suddenly, all the things, all the accomplishments, all of the work, all of the effort that I had put into the past 12 years of my life meant nothing. Because now I was in a world that didn't care. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, there was this part of me, a nagging bit of me, that wanted impact, that intangible little thing that all these young kids want to have, an impact on the world without knowing what it meant, without knowing how to measure it. They wanted to feel like they mattered, and I wanted to too. I never really got it. I never got that closure. I've switched my major in college twice now over it. But I'm making this video now, and I sit here and I thought about it, and I realized that at this moment in time, this moment where I'm recording this, I'm not depressed. Things aren't tragic in my life. I don't know when it started. I don't know when it started to feel a little bit lighter on my head. But I know that right now it didn't hurt. I think there's something to be said about that period of your life where you're trying to determine what to do with the rest of it. It's more difficult than I think anyone wants to imagine. Everyone will always tell you that you'd get out of high school and everything would be better. All your problems with high school would be gone. And that's not true. The decisions you make in high school still haunt me. If I had been better, if I had been Maybe if I had tried harder in classes, gotten a scholarship, I'd be in a different course in my life. Those aren't true. I can't go back and change that. The bullying, those things, they might not seem as important, but the damage is still there. You're still scared of people. You're still scared of being around them. And guilt doesn't go away that easily. But when you have all that baggage, when it's still on your shoulders, when you're still thinking about it, when you're still actively wondering about it, it's hard to realize that life is passing you by. When you're wallowing in your past and your self-pity and in your loathing, it's hard to realize just how fast time is going now. I think about my high school graduation, but I've been out of high school for almost 6 years. And in that time, I've gotten almost nowhere in a college degree. I've switched to being a broadcast student. I never knew what I wanted to do with my life. I never had that planned out. I was never given an opportunity to find something I was passionate about. And there was a part of me that was hoping that I would just die under unfortunate circumstances and I wouldn't have to deal with it. But that's not gonna happen to me. I'm never been one to get the things that I want just because I wanted them. I guess the reason I made this video was because depression isn't just some word you can put down. It's not just a label that you can slap onto a person. It will tell you everything you need to know about them. I realized that while I was making this, that perhaps my desire to help somebody, that my want for some person who's having a hard time in their life to watch this video and maybe have some life advice, was self-righteousness. It was selfish reasoning. And maybe that's wrong, and maybe that's right. I won't ever know that. I guess the thing I want to say, the thing that I want to tell people, is that it will have those times in your life where it will hurt, where depression is heavy, where you'll never be able to deal with it. But there'll be times where it won't be there. Maybe just a fleeting moment. But if you can feel that moment out, if you can find that tiny sliver of time where you can think straight, where maybe you weren't depressed, take that moment. Take that moment and do something with it, because just maybe it will kickstart you on a path that will help you. And I'll tell you about mine. I'll tell you what changed in me all of a sudden. I had started this podcast about a month ago. It was kind of a whim. It was this combination of everyone was doing it. It seemed like something easy to make, but also my friends do make YouTube. It looked like they had fun doing it, and I kind of wanted to do it myself. So I thought I'd do this, something that plays more to my strengths. I'm a better speaker than I am entertainer. As I was making these videos, I was planning one out. I had an episode on anime. I was part of an anime club, so I am actually a pretty big anime fan. Maybe that didn't show through in that video, but I was keeping my snob under control. I remember writing out that episode and thinking to myself, it would be nice if I could get some other YouTuber who's known for their anime references or jokes to be on the podcast. And I was wondering who I could ask. And it wasn't serious at first. At first I just thought it would be nice. I didn't put any thought into it. And then I saw Sandy. I saw Papushi, and I'd been a fan of hers for a long time. And I remember the day I asked her to be on the podcast. I was sitting in front of a tweet for God, almost 20 minutes staring intensely into a monitor, wondering how I wanted to invite this person who had never heard of me, who had no business saying yes. So I was really shocked when she actually agreed. In fact, I was so shocked, and I'm sure she probably picked up on this, that I had absolutely nothing prepared. I was never planning for any person of noteworthiness to be on the show. I was never prepared to have to do any of this. And so I put together that episode so quickly that it was just a sloppy mess, and I look back on it now and I kind of think that way about it. I think it turned out great, and I'm really glad she was on that show, because even though she did it on a whim, and I know that, I'm not that immune to the sensibilities of people, autism aside, that I didn't realize that she had done it on nothing more than just kind of a whim. It made me happier than I had any right being. It made it feel like the things that I was doing or the things that I was saying, that somebody was willing to listen to them. It's hard to describe what confidence can feel like when it snaps you out of a funk you're in. Because Sandy gave that to me. Sandy saying yes on that show, it made me more confident to do so many more things in my life. I've rethought of how I do everything. And I can't thank her enough for that. I might have thanked her for being on that podcast, but this will probably be the closest thing I'll ever give to a true thanks. Not just for the podcast, but for all the things that happened afterwards. I want to give people something positive. I've been depressed to this whole episode. I've been down. I've told people how hard life can be. And I've told them about confidence. I want to tell people about confidence. I want to be able to tell those stories. I want to tell good stories. I want the next episode I do by myself to not be about depression or something so dark or cynical. I want it to be happier, and I think that desire to make that the next story I tell isn't so sad. I want to be happier. I really do. And I've thought about it. I thought about what I needed, what I wanted. I thought maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was more friends, maybe it was a place to go that wasn't this 10-foot by 10-foot room that I record this shit in. Truth is, I want to be confident. I want to wake up and not hate the person I see in the mirror. I want to not hate who I am. Sandy agreeing to be on that show gave me quite a bit of confidence. And so much so that I even changed my major. I was originally going to go to school to be a history teacher, and as much as I would like to be a teacher, I changed my major to broadcast, to radio. And it's been a scary change. It's been an intimidating change because I have to start the entire process of college and planning out my future again from scratch. I wouldn't recommend it. That's probably not the way that most people should want to handle their future. But it's made me a much happier person ever since. So I guess if I'm going to tell anyone anything, that if you gain anything from this video, if anything about my story, about my self-loathing or my hatred for myself means anything to anyone, if none of that matters, I want you to take this away from what I'm talking about. you'll never get confident sitting and wallowing in your own self-pity and your own sadness. And it can be so hard. It can be so easy to just close up, to just become emotionally dead to get through your day. But even if just a little bit, just for that small moment, you have an opportunity to do something crazy, to do something that will put your life back on a good track. Take it. You know, the risk can be terrifying. It can be completely nerve-wracking, like changing a college major, or the risk could be non-existent, where rejection is the only thing you'll deal with. But take a chance with something, whether it's something new or something that you've always liked. Life doesn't get better if you wait for it to get better. You need to find something. I don't know what that might be for you. For me, it was tossing in my 2 cards with a YouTuber who may have been on my podcast. And it changed the whole course of everything. You might be different. But don't just sit there and wait for it all to become better. Because it won't. I promise you that. And I know that maybe what I'm saying here is self-righteous. Maybe it's selfish. Maybe it's coming from a place that it sounds like I don't understand other people at all. And you're probably correct. There's probably not a whole lot I can argue about that. I've never been intrinsically good at dealing with people. But I guess if you find yourself in the same spot I've been in, hating yourself for your decisions you've made in your past, for hating yourself for who you are as a person, for hating yourself because of all of your circumstances, then my advice to you is this. Go out and make the change in your life that you want to be. Go out and experience the life that you want to have. Don't wait. Don't wallow. Don't sit and think that it'll all be better eventually. Trust me. It won't. You'll get stagnant. You'll sit there and you'll wonder why nothing's going your way. You'll wonder why the world isn't fair. Because it's not. It's not going to wait for you. It's not going to hold your hand. I'm beginning to sound stereotypical, aren't I? It's hard for me to express it. Because so many good things have happened to me that I don't deserve recently. And I know that that won't be the case for everybody. Other people aren't going to have the same luck. They're not going to find the right person on the right day to help them. So then maybe if you know someone who is depressed, help them. It's hard for a person who's depressed, who's so full of self-loathing, to accept your open door, to tell you, to come up to you, to have the confidence and the courage to discuss what's wrong with them. So don't just be an open door. Talk to them. Pursue them. Reach out to them. Get out and help those people that you say you're always there to help. Don't just be full of words and promises. If you actually care about the people in your life, the ones who are depressed, who are hurting, then you'll do more than just say you'll be there for them. You'll know that just because your door's open doesn't mean they'll have the courage to walk in. And I'm not trying to make you guys out your open doors are inefficient or that it's bad. You shouldn't assume. I guess before I sign off on this little episode, I want to do two things. First, I want to give a formal thank you to Sandy Rojas down at the Papushi. I can't thank you for what you did for me. There really isn't a way I can do that. There's nothing I'll do, there's nothing I'll say that'll convey to you what you being on that podcast meant for me and did for me. So thank you. And the other thing I want to say, if you have depression, if you have something that's eating you, the world's full of open doors. And I know it's going to be hard. I know it's difficult to take any single one of them. But if you wait for someone to come to you, it might not happen. It might not happen. Find one of those people. It could be your dad. It could be your best friend. It could be your mom. Find that person and talk to them. Tell them how you really feel. Tell them what's really wrong with you. If they're really your friend, if they're really the people who care, they'll listen to you. And I know how hard that position is. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to have people who say they're there for you, who say they care, but not believing them because you know you don't care. You don't care about yourself. It's hard. I know it is. So, I think before you can ever do anything else in your life, you have to come to like yourself. There's no easy way to do it. I still struggle with it every day. I still hate the guy I see in the mirror. But I'm working on it, and I hope that maybe this story will hear someone, or will find someone who needs it, who knows that feeling of self-loathing, and I hope that it will help them. I hope that my cryptic Jedi bullshit might help somebody. But I guess the only thing I can do for right now is thank the people who are listening this far in, who heard what I had to say. And don't hate me for everything that I've admitted. So, this has been your host, Elijah Stubbs Roche, and I'll see you next week.